Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Reasons for Decline of Muslims. By Allama Ghulam Ahmed Parwez. Introduction. In the annual issue of the Talooi-Islam magazine of March 1949 a question was raised. Today, the Muslims wherever they are in the world are but in poverty and disgrace compared to other peoples. What is the reason for this humiliation and degradation? Many an answer was received from the varied cross-section of the knowledgeable sages, intellectuals, thinkers, and the discerning, and all were published in the subsequent issues of the magazine. Finally, the author wrote a fully comprehensive article on the subject, which was published in the January/February 1950 issues. It rose in such popularity that it had to be reproduced in the 1952 issue and hereafter. To meet the demand, it was published in book form in March 1956. After this a second edition was also published in the same year, followed by the third edition in 1962. During this period, the writer was obliged to answer many questions on various positions in the article. Many new queries were placed before him requiring satisfactory answers, and thus a greater review emerged. And a necessity, more profound, for an original and more elaborate version of the book arose. This, then, the author reviewed and compiled in this new modified version of the book now being published. For the welfare of the people, it is necessary to publish these views as much and as widely as possible, and that is why this is being published as a paperback edition. The question as to why we are, to such an extent mean, poor and disgraced requires a deep contemplation and nothing less. In our society, collectively speaking, this question is considered unfit to be tackled, and unworthy of contemplation in the first place, and if perchance a conversation is struck on the topic, it is either lightly avoided or it is washed away in a flood of emotions. Religious worshippers always tend to get angry when this question is raised, and they more often than not shirk away from it, saying that these kinds of voices are raised by the Western-minded, materialistic, non-deistic, to whom the aim of life is only the success in this world, its goodness and luxury. They are unbelievers of ruhaniyat, spiritualism, and they have no concern whatsoever with Allah and His Rasul, Messenger, peace be upon him, while the worshippers of God eye only the hereafter, and that is their real home. This world is a temporary abode where man stops to rest as on a wayside inn in his journey of life and awaits for a short period of time. Such a traveler never stops to think as to what sort of an inn was it where he has rested. Instead, his thought is to spend the night at this place and then move on the next morning. But when our educated youth hears this advice and exhortation, and since it is being given in the name of religion, these youngsters come to regard Islam as the major obstacle in the path of progress, gets disgusted and rebels. He says such a religion, akin to Christianity, should be confined to the four walls of the mosque, and mundane matters should be run, like the Europeans, with our mind, wisdom, and intellect. Religion has ruined us. The sooner we get rid of it the better. This contention is becoming sharper with each passing day. In view of this contention, this question was raised in the Talooi-Islam magazine, answered by the author in such a manner with his prudence, insight and discernment of the Quran that the disease was correctly diagnosed and the cure was also manifested. In the matter of diagnosis, no matter how lengthy the details may be, the gist is that deen, the way of life of Islam, was offered from Allah to the people, which made their earthly life successful and bountiful, and so also their hereafter. But the so-called believers of the Anbiya, receivers of the message, themselves later turned that deen into religion. This religion kept the people in strange deceits. This is what is happening to Islam as well. But we have safe with us the Book of God, with which we can transform this religion into deen again. And this alone is the cure of the disease. It is our prayer and supplication that you will not read it with a cursory glance, but give it your careful, thoughtful, and studious attention. And if you agree with it, then pass it on to your friends and dear ones. This may make this thought widespread, and the people become fit to take the next step to get out of the present state they are in. This will not only make them stand in the row of the living people but also, they will become worthy of their leadership. Administrator, Idaratul Islam. 25B, Gulberg 2. Lahore 54660, Pakistan. February 1969. Decline and fall of the Muslims. The question under consideration. Muslim settlements are found in most parts of the world. Some reckon their number to be 400 million and others regard it to be 500 to 600 million. No matter what the number is, they stretch from Indonesia to Morocco. Africa has quite a substantial population. In many European countries Muslims abide. In Russia and China, they are well populated. Of the Muslim nations, some are totally independent, some have semi-independent and semi-subjugated status, while they are in total subjugation in others. There are also countries where they live with other non-Muslims. This then is the state of affairs of the Muslims' populace. Now, let us consider their state of life. Those that are independent are very weak and degraded in comparison to the independent non-Muslim states. Afghanistan, Iran, Hejaz, Egypt, Syria, Indonesia etc., are not only weak compared to America and Europe but also surviving at their mercy. They have to accept whatever conditions are imposed upon them. Each one of them accepts aid from one non-Muslim government or another. Food, grains, machinery or technology, varied essential articles needed for daily living, medicines, military armaments, so much so that even monetary help is remitted by them. All this is procured from non-Muslim governments so that Muslim governments can somehow manage their affairs. This is not all. Even with such large populations, as in Russia and China, they live a life of subordination. It is also true in some other East European countries. In all of them, authority and command is in the hands of others. All their elite and notables are never heard of to be Muslims. In these states there is supposedly no concept of ruler or the ruled, but in practice we find the Muslims to be of the ruled class. Coming nearer home, before independence, both the Muslims and the Hindus in India were ruled by the British, but there too the Muslims' position was far too weak. It seemed that both the British and the Hindus ruled the Muslims. There, the 90% of our population was indebted to Hindus. They were ahead of us in knowledge, business, and the Hindus were also fabulously wealthy. In government service too theirs was a far greater number. Even today there are crores. 1 crore equals 10 million. Of Muslims in Hindustan, but their lot has gone far worse. Neither is their life, nor is property safe, nor their honor and chastity. Nor are their mosques or monasteries secure, so much so that even their cemeteries are not safe. The Hindus push them around like cattle according to their whim and fancy, when and where they want, and there is nowhere for them to go or file a complaint to. That brings us to Pakistan. Although independent and may God safeguard it, Pakistan is still dependent on the West even for its basic necessities. Half the populace lives in huts and some of the people go without food every night, and do not have a stomach full of meal. Others do not have clothing to cover their bodies. Our womenfolk do not go out for lack of adequate clothing to cover their bodies properly. Patients die due to lack of medicine or treatment before the very eyes of their parents, who witness their children wriggling and tossing restlessly before dying slowly. Because they do not have enough coppers for their treatment. And there are many who have to sell off their pots and pans to pay for their funeral expenses. Vagrancy is the lot of most Pakistani school children because their parents cannot afford to pay for their schooling. And a great number remains illiterate and ignorant due to their parents' poverty. Many marriageable girls are sitting at home because their parents cannot betroth them with dignity. This then is just not the state of Pakistani Muslims, but is the state of almost all Muslim countries. Mentioning and categorizing their miseries would serve no purpose. Even in Europe, where Muslims live along with non-Muslims, they are conspicuous by their poverty, be it housing or clothing. In fact, their very appearance is pathetic. Obviously, such conditions produce their own problems and evils. Further on, Muslims, as has been said above, live in various regions of the earth. Their geographical states are as different as their varying atmosphere and weather. Different is their way and mode of living. Even their language is naturally different. But in them there is just one thing in common, i.e., they are all Muslims and their religion is the same. Religion is their common factor. Now, think for a moment. If a non-Muslim, considering their entire state of affairs throughout the world, comes to the conclusion that in comparison to other peoples of the world this poverty, weakness and dishonor of Muslims is due to their religion, the basic cause, then, what answer do we have? Surely, it would hurt us most, but then no individual can take it if his religion is attacked in this way. It would make him go mad with rage. But by being angry would not answer that non-Muslim's objective question. If this is not the reason or cause of our retrogression, then what is? I request you to consider this question thoroughly and calmly, and if you cannot arrive at an answer, then please do ask someone else to solve it for you and see if you get from anywhere a satisfactory answer as to why this poverty, this disgrace. Why is he on the heels of others? Why is he dependent on others than their own? Why a beggar of their den? Its answer. You will not get an answer to that question from anywhere else but if you listen to the khutbah, sermon. In the mosque you will hear that the decline and downfall of Muslims is because they have abjured their religion and that Western education has made our people non-religious. He does not perform namaz, prayer, does not fast, remains in suits and boots, shaves off his beard, and goes to clubs to sing and dance. Their wives do not observe purdah, veil, and use facelifts, makeup, visit cinema houses, etc., etc. The speaker says his piece and goes away. But you, with a cool mind and heart, think whether the lowliness, which is our lot, is really due to what has been said above. First and foremost consider the Westerners on whom we are dependent. Do they not do the very same things of which we are being rightly or wrongly accused of in our mosques? They, too, have forsaken their religions. They, too, wine and dine, sing and dance, and their wives wear makeup, etc. And their wives along with their husbands go to the gymkhanas, private exclusive clubs. Then why are they ahead of us? On the other hand, note that among us very few people have abjured their religion. The majority follows the religion. They perform their namaz, prayers, fast, and are religious to the spirit and letter of the word, even dressing exactly as the religion requires. So, also do their womenfolk. But despite this adherence, their life is no different from those who have gone modern. In fact, if you consider further, you will find that it is the poor who comply with the religion most. But being religious did not improve their lot. As a rule they have remained poor and indigent, and lead a hard and difficult life. From this, it is quite evident that this is not the answer to that objective question. This objection in itself is wrong. From most of them you will get the reply that the objective question is wrong in itself. If a Muslim is poor, weak, with no bread to eat or clothes to wear or a home to live, it does not mean he is lowly and in disgrace or is contemptible. They may be so in the eyes of the world, but in the eyes of God the standard of judgment between the respectable and the dishonorable, the rich and the poor, is different altogether. The worldly goods and belongings are mischievous. The more you shun these mischievous worldly things, the more favored and trusted you become in the eyes of God. The world is a dead thing, a carcass, and the one who yearns for it is a dog. A mu'min, a highly developed Muslim, lives out this life within the four walls as a prisoner. This earthly life is for the unbelievers, whereas for the Muslim is the hereafter. Even if the mu'minin, plural of mu'min, have to bear difficulties in this world, which is but for a few days, it should be borne as being a trial from Allah. He keeps on trying his bondman. The one, who perseveres in the trial and is found to be successful, would eventually be rewarded with the life in paradise, his real and eternal home. The one whose hereafter has been set right has accomplished everything. Remember, God has reserved sustenance in his own hands. He restricts the sustenance of those whom he wills, offer plenty to whom he wills. It is he who bestows respect or degrades whom he wills. Man must, in any situation, be satisfied and remain so through thick and thin. One who objects to his lot is in fact objecting to the decisions of God. His lamentation and complaints would in fact be against the elevated Creator. What right has a slave to object to the decision of his master? A mu'min is actually one who is contented, gratified with whatever is bestowed on him by his Creator. Please understand that poverty and wretchedness, dependence and dishonor have all come about because so was his will. All these and more debasement should be considered as mercy and compassion from God. This is the sermon that we have been hearing from the pulpits, since childhood, in mosques everywhere. Even today we hear the same things, repeatedly and many times over. But the question is whether this is the actual teaching of Islam. Is this the commandment of the Quran? Is it also the aim and object of Allah as well that Muslims remain poor, miserable, and dependent on others? Are poverty in the world, meanness, dishonor, and disgrace the signs of God's trusted and favored believers? No matter how or with what answers we are given to soothe ourselves, these are definitely not the answers offered by the Quran. Its teaching is 45:13. All that is in the heights and depths of the heavens and earth is entirely subdued for you, so that you may make use of it. He has shown the signs of true and steadfast mu'minin is to be 8:4. For them are the means for their security and safeguard and materials and provisions for their respectable and dignified livelihood. About his friends it states 10:64. For them in this world as well as in the hereafter are glad tidings of happiness and prosperity. This is the law of Allah that can never change. The dua, prayer, that he teaches the mu'minin is as follows. 201. O our Sustainer! Grant us a beautiful, pleasant, and wholesome life in this world, and also grant the same beautiful, pleasant and wholesome life in the hereafter. It very clearly states 39:10. Those who do constructive deeds in this life will have a life of happiness and prosperity in this world. He shows the natural outcome of those who do good and righteous deeds to be 24:55. God has already given the promise that those people who have iman, conviction, and do righteous deeds, he will honor them with governmental authority in this world in the same manner and the way he honored those before them with authority. He shows the paradise-like life in this world to be 118-119. In it, neither will man starve nor will man go naked, and neither would he have fear of thirst or the scarcity of housing. In contrast to all the foregoing, he very clearly states 124. Those who are disobedient to our orders and commands we will restrict his livelihood, and he will also get up blind on the day of resurrection, the doomsday. Do not pass casually over this last ayat. Verse. Ponder a moment over it. In it Allah has in very clear terms stated that those who disobey his commands and orders will have their livelihood restricted, and they will also be raised up blind on the day of resurrection. You must have understood on reflection as to what a punishment it is from God not to have a livelihood or have it restricted in this world, and the severity of which will be extended in the hereafter. In being raised up blind, thus ruining his life in the next world. At another place he has said that those who commit blasphemy and infidelity against his divine blessings. 112. Allah makes them taste starvation and fear. And the signs shown on whom befalls Allah's punishment are 22:9. They are in this life too lowly and become disgraced. And because of which 9:74. They are in this world in severe punishment. He has shown, when the people of Israel turned away from the commandments of Allah. 2. 61. On them befell the azab, punishment, of indignity, dishonor, and disgrace, and they became entitled to his wrath and anger. From these verses, ayat, you must have noted that lowliness and disgrace in this life is the punishment of Allah, so also are the forms of scarcity of food, houses, livelihood, and relevant humiliations are but punishment of Allah. As against these, Allah's beloved people enjoy His bounties in abundance, happiness of every kind, and of course with respectable and dignified livelihood. They are honored with statehood and government. The forces in the heavens and the earth are under their rule. They live a very honorable and dignified life amongst the peoples of the planet Earth. Allah has said in clear terms. 4. 141. This can never come to pass that the non-Muslims could overcome the Muslims. For them, the decision of Allah is. 3. 138. If you are a mu'min, then you will overcome everyone. Therefore, it is totally wrong to say complacently that poverty, humiliation, disgrace, etc. are the signs of those who live in harmony with Allah's laws. On the contrary, those who harmonize with Allah's laws lead a life of honors, dignity, prosperity, power, and eminence. He says all this is His verdict and He never changes His decisions. It is possible that due to some setback a nation may be weakened and people may be reduced to poverty and dependence. That this should happen is one thing, but that any group of people should become perpetually as such and remain satisfied in this condition, rather regard it as Allah's blessing, is quite another. The Muslims in general have been in this condition for centuries. How to acquire bread with dignity? This fact has come before us that according to the Quran, in this world the respectable life is where there are provisions in abundance and in supply for sustenance, without the fear a super controller curtailing it in any way, and where life is of humankind's worthiness, dignity, and splendor. The life of fear is punishment from Allah. But the question now is, how are the provisions of food, material for security, wealth, affluence, all of which are necessary for the removal of anxiety and fear, are to be attained? Quran says that this universe is running under these laws of nature, and for our necessities of life we will have to follow these laws of nature. In this field, all human beings are the same. Everyone has equal right to it. There is no distinction between a mu'min and a kafir. The unbeliever, whoever follows the laws of nature, will acquire his needs. After all, the life of both of them exists on the same physical laws. For instance, a non-believer exists by breathing, so also does a mu'min. They both need food for life, and the effects of poison on both will be the same. In fact, even our Rasuls, prophets, body was nonetheless affected by poisoning when that Jewess poisoned his food. As such, the necessities of existence and their attainment is ruled by one and the same law for all human beings. There is no distinction between a mu'min and a non-Muslim. When he said, 45. 13. Whatever there is in the depths and heights of the universe we have subdued for you. When it says for you, it is addressed not only to Muslims but to humans. Any human, who endeavors and strives for it, nature will make him custodian of its concealed secrets. In it, there is no distinction between Muslims and Kafirs. Allah has made man Khalifa fil earth * and said man alone was given ilm al-asma, knowledge of objects, elements, etc. in nature. * Quran has called Adam as Khalifa fil earth, but we have made him Khalifadullah fil earth, meaning, Allah's vicegerent on earth. With this, the difficulty arose whether the Pharaoh and Nimrud can also become Khalifadullah. So, his Khalifadullah he was declared exclusively for the Mu'mins, although, follows, successor, on the planet Earth. Before man certain species populated the world and Adam is the successor of these species. Meaning, he is now living in their place. This then settles the controversy of God's vicegerents. To this successor man, Allah gave Adam knowledge of objects, elements, etc. In nature that was not given to the populace, nowhere has the Quran called Adam as Khalifadullah fil earth. The meaning of Khalifa is one who before man. They, in matter of the series of evolution, were left behind. Therefore, in the world to be successors to the previous species and in the mastery of subjugation of the forces of nature and its heritage, there is no distinction between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. The conception of Allah's vicegerency or deputizing is also wrong because either or both is done in absence of someone. While Allah is omnipresent, therefore, his deputizing or vicegerency does not arise at all. The distinction between Momins and Kafirs arises when the question of the use of the outcome of harnessing nature comes to the fore. For more details see my book Iblio Adam. Therefore, should man desire, he can use this knowledge for his benefit. In this matter, nature will not withhold itself from one group and allow itself to be exploited by another. There will be no difference in its exploitation, may it be by a Muslim or an atheist. Yes, there will be difference in its usage, and this will be dealt with in the coming pages. But, as has been repeatedly said, there will be no difference in these ensuing results. Behold, with what clarity Quran details this point. 11. 15. Those who want the grace and elegance of this life shall have fully the results of their endeavors in this world. In this world there shall be no reduction of any kind, for them. Furthermore, in this matter, please see the verse. Ayat. In Surah. Chapter. Bani Israel E. 18. 21. From which this fact will be totally clarified. From the aforesaid issues, we arrive at the results mentioned below. Diamond suit in this life, abundance of necessities of life and fearlessness is worthy and fit to human splendor. Diamond suit necessities for existence can be availed only by the subjugation of nature. Diamond suit, the concealed wealth of nature, is available to any race or people provided it strives for its attainment. In this, there is no distinction between a Muslim and a non-Muslim. Diamond suit, those who do not endeavor and strive for subjugation of nature are deprived of the sustenance of life. Diamond suit, and those who are deprived of this sustenance or are dependent on others for its attainment is a life of indignity, which is the punishment of Allah. Meaning of this life and the hereafter. Now let's move ahead. In the Quran you will also find those verses. Ayat. Wherein worldly possession has been termed mean and abject, against which the hereafter is upheld as permanent and durable. These are those verses. Ayat. On which the conservatives and the traditionalists have leaned on to support and brand the impermanence and the unsuitability of the world and its possession as lowly and vile to be the portion of the unbelievers, and the hereafter to be exclusively for Allah's favorites. Nonetheless, it is still very important to understand these portions of the Quran correctly. This portion is a bit difficult. Difficult because it is one discourse that will come to most readers as totally new. In any case, this portion calls for deep concentration and attention. It is not in doubt that the Quran declares the period between man's birth to his physical death, to be life of this world, and the life after this physical death to be as the life of the hereafter. To have conviction on this life and in the hereafter, i.e., life after death, is inseparable from a moment's life. One who denies it is a kafir and cannot be a momin even though he may have conviction on other remaining issues. But, and this is a very important but, the connotation and usage of the words this world and the hereafter by the Quran, not only imply its apparent meanings. It uses these words in other senses as well. The truth is the Quran uses many words by way or manner of expressions and phraseology. And until Quranic phraseology is not understood in its correct connotation or meaning, it is not possible to understand it. In the path of Quranic understanding, this is such an important point that if once overlooked, rejected or thrown out, it would involve us in and thereby create all these unwanted quarrels, difficulties, complexities, and entanglements, and because of which we are today suffering from anxieties of the heart and mind. As a result, despite our numerous efforts, we cannot arrive at a correct Quranic understanding. At times, we are so involved in the Quranic connotations that it seems just impossible to extricate ourselves from it. And man, God forbid, comes to regard Quranic ayat as riddles and enigmas. Hence, Quranic sense, meaning and connotation should first be understood thoroughly, and the words this world and hereafter hold great importance. But before grappling with these terms, please understand once more that let it not be construed that the concept of life after death is incorrect. Our Iman is based on life after death. Life is an endless flow, which goes from here to there continuously. Therefore, in the Quran where life after death is mentioned, it means exactly what it says. The literal meaning of dunya means here and now, and the akhrath means the hereafter. Akhrath means what is to come later, which would mean the future. In the life of an individual or a people there is one future which comes in this very life. But from the Quranic point of view, apart from this future, there is another as well, but it comes in the hereafter. Therefore, there are two kinds of future. One kind is in this life and the other in the life to come. We shall first discuss the future of this life and later the one that comes after death. First, we will tackle the future in this life. In this world there are two kinds of persons. One who leaps for the here and now or the immediate gain. Their entire effort is for this immediate gain and for their own interests. They are not concerned as to what will happen to those who are to come or the people who are to follow. They are only occupied with their self-indulgences and luxuries. It is not for them, they would say, to think or consider the brunt to be borne by the humanity who is to come or is to follow. Their entire efforts and endeavors are for the present, and there is no thought whatsoever for the future. Hence, by Quranic connotations, the here and now and the immediate gains are called the world, dunya, while the future of this world is called akhrath. Therefore, Quranic view of mata-e dunya would mean that gain which one seeks for himself. A mata-e akhrath, possession of the hereafter, means those possessions, material, equipment, and properties saved and stored for the coming generations. Here, too, from the Quranic point of view, generations does not mean the generations of any one person or family, but the entire humankind. A person or a nation who just seeks immediate gains. That is well-being of present only. His present will become pleasant and wholesome, but his future would not be bright. Against this, however, humankind's correct way of life is that its endeavors should not be spent for the betterment only of the present, but also for the betterment of the coming generation of humankind, i.e., the future. Also, it says the immediate gains do carry in themselves tremendous attraction. Their glittering splendor dazzles them. They engender a life of comfort and luxury involving little hard work. And the results forthcoming are immediate. But, those who believe in this way of life disintegrate, and for such there is nothing at all in the hereafter. However, in this context the difficulty that arises is that the immediate gains are conspicuously perceptual, but the gains of the future are still out of sight. Hence, only those will strive and strain for the future who are convinced of the unseen results. For example, there are two farmers. Each one of them has a mound of wheat, which happens to be their only possession. One of them goes to the field and starts plowing it, mixing the seeds with the soil, his only possession of life, while the other farmer makes fun of him. He takes his share of wheat to the mill and grinds it into flour and brings it home. The first farmer has to make do with corn and barley, or at times even go without it and starve it out. In contrast, the second farmer and his family enjoy wheat bread, i.e., to say he has achieved immediate gain, but he has no share in the future. Future will be that of the other farmer. It will glitter, and his will be the storehouse with ears of wheat where seeds produce 700 grains each, all in neat stacks. For the duration of the seed to turn into harvest, he had to endure difficulties or even pangs of hunger. But after that a cyclic order was established, because of which his present becomes pleasant and wholesome while his future a glittering splendor. But for this, initial condition was that the first farmer had conviction in the fact that the seeds he had mixed into the soil were not going to be lost or wasted. In the universe there is a firm law in action which will turn the seeds into sprouts. Those sprouts will then transform into stalks or stems, which in its turn changes into ears of wheat, which will provide sack loads full of harvest. He had absolute conviction both in his labor and in the unshakable law of the universe. This unshakable and immutable law of the universe that turns the seeds into ears of harvest is called Sunnatullah, or the law of Allah, in which there can never be any change. 33. 62. This unchangeable and permanent law is in itself proof which invites Iman. If the farmer did not have conviction in this law and in its permanence that it will change the seeds into harvest, then he would not have mixed the seeds into the soil. Because experience through time immemorial has shown man that there could not be change in this law of nature. That is why he takes the risk of mixing them into the soil in a set method, by plowing it and turning it into harvest. This undivided conviction makes him sow the seeds into the soil, and calmly wait for the results. Now comes the second condition. After sowing the seeds in a set manner or rule, water is then provided at set times. In this program, two efforts are in force at the same time. One is the unchanging, fixed, and stable law of nature, and the other is the painstaking labor of the farmer, in accordance with required set rule. Mutual harmony is required between both for a bumper harvest. This is called the law of the Makafathi Amal, or the law of retribution. If the farmer's efforts are in disharmony with nature, then his efforts will go in vain. 2. 17. Let this be quite clear that by laws of God it is not to be inferred that they merely mean the laws of nature. Along with it, there are many other laws of Allah, the observance of which is extremely necessary for man. Taqwa. These laws are safe in between the covers of the Quran. The observance and practice of these laws is called taqwa. But the laws of nature are not exempted from it. They are also included in the laws of God. Therefore, the observance of these laws of nature is compulsory for one to become a muttaqi. It needs to be emphasized once again that if a certain people who only observe the laws of nature cannot ever be termed as muttaqi. Likewise, the others who do not observe and practice these laws of nature also cannot be termed as muttaqi. However, those who harness the laws of nature, they do achieve their results. Even though they do or do not obey other laws, and those who do not harness them remain deprived of the results. This is the meaning of hereafter in connection with this worldly life. Below, the second meaning will be discussed. The second connotation and meaning of the word hereafter. One view of life is that we exist exclusively for this world, and on death this life comes to an end. The aim of this worldly life is to amass worldly wealth and possession and lead a life of comfort and luxury. Towards achieving it, any mode or method is proper and therefore can be adopted. Only this precaution is necessary, that one should not fall foul of the government laws. And should one fall foul, then he should make every effort possible to escape the police and the arms of the judicial laws and regulations. There is no law beyond the law of the government, and there is no grasp or accountability beyond the police and the courts of the country. For personal gain, every ruse or trick can be devised, and it is permissible. The second viewpoint of human life is that its physical existence is on the same plane as that of an animal. But human life begins on a higher level. Man does not consist merely of his physical body. In him there is one other element which is called human personality. The aim of life is both to develop the human body as well as his human personality. As with the upbringing of the body, there are also laws governing the development of the human personality. These are revealed laws and are enshrined in the Quran. They are permanent values. Humans should work hard to acquire worldly possessions. But if there is a clash between worldly gains and future permanent values, then he should sacrifice his present gains in favor of his permanent values, thereby developing his human personality further. In this way, man would in the next life continue to pass on through the great stages of evolution and move on forward. This is called life after death, the life in the hereafter. For example, a businessman finds an opportunity to commit fraud in such a way that no one would ever learn of it. It involves thousands of rupees, and even if caught he would bribe his way out. If he has no iman in the hereafter, then without any hesitation at all, he will carry out his fraud. But if he were a believer in the hereafter, he would never do such a thing. Because honesty is a permanent value, and by safeguarding these values man's self develops and thereby also decorates and embellishes his life after death. On the other hand, worldly gains could be achieved by dishonesty, but his self is ruined, so much so that whether he comes in the grip of the law or police is of no consequence to him. But it does affect God's law of retribution, from which, let alone man's acts, even the thoughts running in his mind do not go unnoticed. Therefore each and every act of man creates a result. In fact, all acts of man himself compile to form his hereafter. According to the Quran, worldly possessions have the powers of attraction and allurement. It should, nevertheless, be obtained. But should an occasion of a clash arise between his worldly profit and his life, then he should never hesitate to expend his wealth to safeguard it. One who saves his wealth when life is in danger, he will become a laughingstock of the world and accursed. This is so because he saved a lower value as compared to a higher value. Now, safeguarding life is indeed very important, but if it happens that one's honor is at stake, then an honorable one is he who, not caring for his life, safeguards his honor. Such a one is very respectable in the eyes of the world. Hence it is clear that the principle of a right way of living is that a lower value should be sacrificed for a higher value. The Quran thus enjoins that for the development of the self, all worldly possessions, whenever in conflict with it, have to be given up and sacrificed for it, no matter how attractive they may be. These are the moments when worldliness is considered lower than the hereafter. Development of the self is a permanent value, and because it achieves permanence after death, it is described as life hereafter. Aim of life. Now substitute the two words dunya and akhirath with those meanings, referred to previously, and consider those positions where Quran has simply called dunya present, here and now, immediate gains, and akhirathas future gains, real possessions. Then everything, the entire discourse will become clear. Quranic teaching is that an individual or a people should not give importance to themselves only, by so doing one only considers his personal aim and objective of life. While, says the Quran, the aim and object should be for the welfare and prosperity of humankind, because only then can humankind evolve itself to pass the gradual evolutionary stages and move towards its proficient and ultimate goal. Those human beings or nations who are self-interested, prey on immediate gains, and their gains are here and now. On the other hand, those people who want to set up in this world such an order under which entire humankind's elevation is reached or achieved are described as those interested in the future of their happiness, welfare and prosperity. Therefore, under Quranic teaching, true and factual effort should be directed and sought for the welfare and prosperity of the entire humankind, and also for the prosperity of the future generations. It also states that those individuals who work for its attainment without breaking any values, then their individual self is developed in such a manner that the self becomes entitled to eternal life. In this way, their world present becomes a life of happiness and rejoicing together with the life in the hereafter future, which also becomes integrated, happy and pleasant. Quran, in a very clear manner, states of the groups mentioned above, the consequences of their efforts, portraying them very lucidly. Two groups. 200. Those people who are of this belief or are followers of this belief that they receive only the immediate gains. They do get those gains. In contrast, those who want their present and future as well to become glittering and refulgent, so shall they have their desires. 201 to 202. And those people who desire that God's law of development performed in such a way that their present as well as their future become commendable and be saved from those despicable and hopeless consequences which is humankind's terrible punishment. Then so shall they be rewarded, never taking long to arrive at the results. When results reach maturity or arrive at a climax, then at that very moment, they become manifest and clear. Quran says that it is just not possible that a people who strive for the future should have their present dark and obscure. That is because after the initial efforts for the future are made, a circle is formed where the coastlines of the present and the future merge to move together forward, and continue to do so. In the farmer's example, when after overcoming the initial difficulties, he takes over the control and reaps the harvest. No sooner the harvest arrives home, his present becomes pleasant and beautiful. And hereafter he engages himself in the preparations for the next harvest. His efforts and endeavors only serve to become the visible result of his future's welfare and prosperity, and this goes on serially moving ever forward. That is, present and future both become shining and brilliantly splendid. That is why it is said. 39:10. Those people who do good and beautiful deeds, then their world, this present life, becomes good and beautiful. And together with the present their future also becomes luminous. 10:63-64. Those people who believe in the correct way as shown by the Quran, have faith in it and lead their lives according to it, for them there is happiness, pleasantness, and prosperity both in the present and in the life hereafter. It is God's firm and unshakable law wherein there can never be any change. And this is a very great success and achievement. Up till now we have observed two groups. One which only wants to see the success of its present, while the other is the one which has an eye also on the future's pleasantness and prosperity. Quran says the first group's present becomes pleasant but it has no share in the future. While the second group's present and the future both become pleasant, beautiful, and prosperous. This is the unalterable and solid law of God in which there can never be any change. 145. Those who desire simply the present and prosperity of the present, they get that which they want. Those who are desirous of the prosperity and pleasantness of the future, they get what they want or desire. It is not God's law that He makes in vain the efforts of those who simply desire the wholesomeness of this life, the present. No, their efforts do not go wasted who seek only the nearby and the immediate gains. They attain these gains, while those who also have an eye on the future, their efforts and endeavors for this very mode and manner keep bearing fruitful results. Please see Surah Bani Israel, wherein how eloquently this great fact is stated. It is said. 17:18. That individual, or people, desires the nearby and the easy, the immediate available gains, then we in accordance with our laws give them the nearby gains, or the immediate gains. But in the future for him will be such a life wherein all his capabilities will burn and singe and his development will come to a stop, and in that life he will find himself in an utter despicable state and shunned by everyone. This is the state of one group. As for the second group it is said. 17:19. An individual, or a people, who looks forward towards the future and puts in the necessary effort and is convinced of the permanent values as enjoined by Allah, then these efforts will bear full fruit. This is the law of nature and the efforts of neither group will go waste. 17:20. The law of nourishment and development applies on both the groups. The gifts of the nourished do not close on anyone. In these efforts and endeavors every people move forward according to its striving and trials. 17:21. Consider historical precedents and see how this very law of ours in the field of economics keep moving different people one over the other eventually. It so happens that those who simply aspire for the present prosperity are wiped out, and those who desire the future's pleasant, wholesome prosperity attain the highest positions. 17:21. The positions of the future and its economic and social pleasantness. Wholesomeness and refulgence is the best, and above all future is only for the one who keeps his economic life strictly in accordance with the laws of eternal revelation. Permanent values. But if any people who for this world devise another god i.e., for the immediate gain devise and formulate one law and for the hereafter keep before them some other law, then this is blasphemy or worse, idolatry or paganism. The result of which would be in very bad circumstance and evil plight and nothing else. 17. 22. And with Allah, the fountainhead of all laws, do not include any other idol or source of law, or else one will be accursed from all sides, and will be entitled to bad and evil circumstances and plight. With this comes the third group. But before we deal with this group, let us summarize. Those people. Group 1. Who only regard this present life as the only life, having no care or bother about the hereafter. They have only devised ways and means for this life and keep acting accordingly. With this they do gain the nearby and the immediate gains. They may be said to be the group of kufr, i.e., who deny the future. As for those people. Group 2. That keep both the present and the future, the dunya and akhirath, in mind. For this it has an order of life that does not distance the present and the hereafter and does not draw a line between them or divide and separate them. Therefore, both the present and the hereafter become refulgent, wholesome, prosperous and pleasant. The Quran calls this group Mu'minin. Their view encompasses the development of the entire humankind that they carry out in accordance with the set program of the Quran. Coming to the group 3, which divides the world and the hereafter into two different worlds. It thinks that there are some efforts, which bestow gains only for this present world, and there are some which decorate the hereafter. To them it is not necessary that whosoever's hereafter is decorated should have their present decorated as well. In fact, against this, they understand that the hereafter is a success of those whose worldly life is chagrined, of disappointment, of misfortune and failure. They regard man's worldly life and the life of the hereafter to be two different lives, neither one having any relation to the other. That is to say, for them the happiness and prosperity or indigence and poverty of this worldly life, there is one authority or God, while to the wholesomeness, the pleasantness, the joys and prosperity of the hereafter there is another. This group does not regard that for both of them the fountainhead of law is one and the same. It regards two different gods for every two revolving circles. Quran says that this kind of a person who tries to travel with his legs in two sailing vessels or boats will eventually find himself drowned. This group of people may be likened to someone who sets fire to the roots of the trees but tries to sprinkle water on it. It thinks that it is possible that the blood in a portion of human body could be pure and pious while in the remaining is sinful. It is his iman conviction that if the roots of the plant are parched and dried out, it matters not, but it will eventually give bunches of fruits. All because, to this group the shoots grow under one law while there is another set of laws for the bunches of fruits and earful of corns. Quran says that any individual or people who try to break into pieces the law of unity which is related to the laws of the universe, then do tell them that his state of the present will be destructive and wretched, and his future would be dark and obscure. Consider, in his matter, in what overflowing words it states. 2. 85. What? You have iman on one portion of the laws of the universe and deny its second portion? The one who acts like this. 2. 85. Who, amongst you, act like this, the result of it will be nothing but dishonor, disgrace, ignominy, notoriety, and infamy in this worldly life. And on the day of judgment they will suffer very severe punishment. He describes this mode or manner of life as 9. 74. And the present and future of such people are dark. And in very clear terms states 9. 74. In this worldly life they will not find any helper, inquirer and solicitor of their state of affairs. 9. 74. Such a way of life is tantamount to reversion to kufr, to become a non-believer, after professing Islam. Allah will afflict them with a painful doom in this world and the hereafter, and they have neither protecting friend nor helper in the earth.